Hey folks, welcome back to Legacy of Old Age. Imagine getting a letter in your inbox, the kind that promises a big win, or a long-lost friend reaching out only to find out it's a trick that wipes your savings clean before you can say. Scam sounds like something out of a movie, right? But for too many of us old-timers, it's a real danger creeping through those screens we're just learning to use. Today, we're talking about protecting seniors from online scams, the kind of sneaky traps that can catch even the sharpest of us off guard. Every senior should know these tricks, because I've seen too many good folks get burned, and I'll be darned if I let it happen to you. Stick with me, because I've got stories that'll make your jaw drop, your heart ache, and maybe even save your wallet, plus a few tips from the old days with a modern twist to keep you safe. In the miles ahead, you'll hear about a sweet widow who lost her nest egg to a fake email, an old farmer who nearly handed over his bank details to a smooth-talking caller, a spunky gal who fell for a "you've won" text, and a close call with my own pop that hit me right in the gut. So grab a cup of coffee or whatever you sipped back when the world moved slower and settle in, folks. This road's got some twists worth taking. It all started a few summers back when I stopped by Mrs. Mabel's place down in Tennessee. She lived in a little clapboard house off a dirt road, the kind with a sagging porch and a garden out back that'd make your mouth water, tomatoes red as a barn, beans climbing high on their poles. Mabel was 82, sharp as a tack, with a laugh that'd warm you up faster than a July sun. She'd been a school teacher for 40 years, raised 3 kids on her own after her husband passed, and had a knack for baking pies that'd win any county fair. But that summer, when I knocked on her screen door with a jar of my mama's peach preserves, I found her sitting at her kitchen table, hands trembling, eyes red from crying. "Mabel, what's wrong?" I asked, setting the jar down on her checkered tablecloth. The air smelled of cinnamon and worry, and her old tabby cat, Whiskers, was curled up at her feet, purring like he knew something was off. She pushed a piece of paper across the table, a printout of an email, the kind that looks official with fancy logos and big promises. "I thought I'd won a sweepstakes," she said, voice cracking like dry leaves. "Said I'd get $10,000. All I had to do was send a little fee to cover taxes." I sent my savings, everything I had left from George's pension. Then they stopped answering, and my bank called. It's all gone. I sat there, folks, feeling my stomach drop like a stone in a well. Mabel had fallen for one of those email scams, the kind that prey on folks like us, who grew up trusting a handshake and a smile, not some faceless crook hiding behind a screen. She'd sent nearly $5,000, money she'd saved for her grandkids' college funds, to a scammer who'd vanished into the ether. "I should have known better," she whispered, wiping her eyes with a handkerchief embroidered with little daisies. But it looked so real, and I thought, maybe I'd finally caught a break. Ever had a close call with a deal that seemed too good to be true, folks? Or maybe you've seen a friend get tangled in a mess like this. Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear how you handled it. That day with Mabel broke my heart, but it lit a fire in me to learn how these scams work and how to spot them before they strike. First trick from the old days with a modern twist: if an email promises you a big win or asks for money up front, don't touch it. Back in the day, we'd say if a deal smells fishy, it's probably rotten. And now you can check the sender's email address for anything odd, like extra letters or numbers. If it's not from someone you know, toss it in the trash or the spam folder, I reckon. Mabel's story was just the beginning, and it got me wondering who else had been caught in these traps. Mabel's story stuck with me like a burr on a wool sock. Folks, that image of her sitting at her kitchen table, eyes red, savings gone, kept playing in my mind like an old record on repeat. It got me wondering who else out there had been caught in these online traps, the kind that sneak up on us old-timers when we're just trying to keep up with this newfangled world of screens and buttons. I didn't have to wonder long, because not 2 months after I left Mabel's place, I heard about Mr. Hank down in Georgia, a good old boy who'd nearly lost everything to a phone call that sounded as real as the rooster crowing at dawn. Hank lived on a small farm just outside Macon, the kind of place where the air smells of hay and honeysuckle, and the fields stretch out like a patchwork quilt under the summer sun. He was 76, built like a barn door, even after all those years, with a laugh that'd shake the leaves off a tree. Hank had been a farmer his whole life, raised hogs, grew peanuts, and could fix a tractor blindfolded with nothing but a wrench and a prayer. He wasn't much for technology, but his daughter had set him up with a smartphone a few years back, saying, "Pa, you gotta keep up with the times, it'll make banking easier." Hank grumbled about it, but he'd gotten the hang of checking his account online. Even if he still called the phone a dang contraption every chance he got. That spring, I was passing through Macon on my way to a family reunion, and I stopped by Hank's place to drop off a sack of pecans I'd picked up for him. He loved them in his pies. I found him out by the barn, pacing back and forth with that phone pressed to his ear, his face redder than a ripe tomato. "Yes, sir, I've been with your bank for 40 years, he was saying, voice tight as a fence wire. "But I don't recall no security breach. You sure you need my account number right now?" I set the pecans down on a hay bale and waited, something in my gut telling me this wasn't right. When he hung up, Hank turned to me, his big hands shaking a little as he shoved the phone in his pocket. "That was the bank," he said, wiping sweat off his brow with a handkerchief. "Said there's been a breach. Someone's trying to get into my account. They needed my number to secure it, but something felt off, so I told them I'd call back." I felt a chill run down my spine. Folks, I'd heard about these scams before, the kind where crooks pretend to be your bank, smooth as silk, and trick you into handing over everything. "Hank," I said, "don't call that number back. Let's check this out first." We went inside, the screen door creaking behind us, and sat at his kitchen table, a sturdy oak piece he'd built himself back in the '70s, scratched and stained from years of family suppers. The air smelled of coffee and linseed oil, and Hank's old hound, Rusty, was snoring in the corner like a freight train. I pulled out my phone and looked up the number that had called him. Sure enough, it wasn't the bank's real number, just a clever fake. "Hank," I said, "that wasn't your bank, it's a scam. They're trying to get your account details to clean you out." His face went pale as a sheet, and he sat back hard in his chair, muttering, "Well, I almost gave them everything. My whole life's savings, right there for the taking." Folks, Hank got lucky that day, real lucky, but not everyone does. Those phone scams are slicker than a greased pig, and they know just how to catch us off guard, especially us old-timers who grew up trusting a voice on the other end of the line. Ever had a call that made your gut twist, folks? Maybe someone claiming to be from the bank or the IRS, or even a grandkid in trouble. Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear how you sniffed it out. That day with Hank taught me a trick from the old days with a modern spin. Back when I was a kid, we'd never give out personal details to a stranger at the door. And now it's the same on the phone. If someone calls asking for your account number or social security, hang up and call your bank directly using the number on your card. Don't trust the caller ID. These crooks can fake that too, slick as you please. Hank's close call got me thinking about how these scams keep finding new ways to trip us up. And it wasn't long before I heard about another one this time, a spunky gal named Betty who got caught in a different kind of trap. One that came through a text message promising a prize, too good to be true. Hank's close call left me rattled. Folks, the thought of him nearly handing over his life savings to a voice on the phone kept me up more nights than I care to admit. It got me thinking about how these scams keep finding new ways to trip us up, like weeds popping through the cracks, no matter how hard you pull them. We old-timers were used to a world where a deal was sealed with a handshake and a look in the eye, not some invisible crook hiding behind a screen. But the more I dug, the more I realized these traps weren't just coming through emails or phone calls. They were sneaking into our pockets through those little text messages we're still figuring out. That's how they got to Miss Betty, a spunky gal from Alabama who learned the hard way that a "you've won" text can cost you more than you'd ever dream. Miss Betty lived in a tidy little bungalow on the edge of Montgomery, the kind of place where the front yard's always blooming with azaleas and the mailboxes painted with sunflowers she did herself. She was 74, with a laugh like a wind chime and a knack for knitting scarves so soft you'd swear they were made of clouds. Betty was a firecracker. She'd been a nurse during the Korean War, raised 4 boys on her own, and could still outdance anyone at the church social, even with her bad hip. She'd gotten a smartphone for her birthday last year, a gift from her grandkids, and she'd taken to it like a duck to water, texting her knitting club, snapping pictures of her garden, even playing some candy matching game that kept her up past midnight. I ran into Betty at the county fair that fall, where she was manning a booth selling her famous lemon squares, the kind that'd make your mouth pucker and your heart sing. I was there to pick up a jar of honey for my sister, but when I saw Betty, I could tell something was off. Her usual sparkle was dim, like a lantern running low on oil, and her hands fidgeted with the hem of her apron as she handed me a square. "Betty," I said, brushing crumbs off my shirt, "you look like you've seen a ghost. What's eating you?" She sighed, heavy as a sack of feed, and pulled out her phone, showing me a text message that had popped up a few weeks back. "You've won a brand new iPad." The message read, all bright and cheery with little confetti emojis dancing around the words. "Just pay a small shipping fee of $50 to claim your prize. Click here." Betty's eyes lit up when she saw it, thinking of how she could use that iPad to video chat with her grandkids up in Chicago. "I thought I'd hit the jackpot," she told me, voice trembling. I clicked the link, paid the fee, even gave Em my card number to be safe. But the iPad never came, and then I got a call from my bank. Someone tried to take out $2,000 from my account. Thank the Lord they caught it in time, but I still lost that $50, and I feel like a darn fool. Folks, my heart sank right down to my boots. Betty, with her big heart and trusting ways, had fallen for one of those "you've won" scams that pop up faster than dandelions in spring. These crooks know just how to hook us, dangling a shiny prize in front of our noses, knowing we might not stop to think twice. Betty wasn't a fool. She was just a gal who'd spent her life believing in the good of folks, not the kind of trickery that hides behind a text message. I gave her a hug right there at the fair, the smell of lemon squares and cotton candy mixing in the air, and promised we'd figure out how to keep her safe from now on. Ever gotten a message that sounded too good to be true, folks? Maybe a prize you didn't sign up for, or a deal that seemed just a little too sweet. Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear how you sniffed it out. That day with Betty taught me a trick from the old days with a modern spin. Back when I was a kid, we'd say if a peddler's deal sounded too good, it was probably a con. Now, if a text says you've won something you didn't enter, don't click that link. and never pay a fee upfront. If you're curious, call the company directly, not the number in the message, but the one on their official website. Those scammers are slick, but we're sharper, and Betty's story wasn't the last I'd hear of these traps sneaking up on us old-timers. Betty's story left a bitter taste in my mouth. Folks like biting into one of her lemon squares only to find it had gone sour. The more I heard about these scams, the more I realized they weren't just coming through emails or texts. They were sneaking into places we thought were safe, like the social media apps we use to keep up with old friends and grandkids. I figured I'd heard the worst of it after Mabel, Hank, and Betty, but I was wrong. The next scam hit closer to home than I ever expected, and it came from my own pop, a man I thought was too stubborn to fall for any kind of trickery. Pop lived in a little house just outside Springfield, Missouri, the kind of place where the porch creaks with every step, and the backyard's full of blackberry bushes he'd planted back when I was a kid. He was 83, a weary old cuss with hands gnarled from years of fixing tractors and a voice that growled like an old diesel engine. Pop wasn't much for technology. He'd only gotten a smartphone because I insisted, saying, "Pop, you gotta see pictures of the grandkids on Facebook." He grumbled about it, calling it a dang fool gadget, but he'd taken to scrolling through his feed every morning, chuckling at videos of cats and liking every photo his grandkids posted, even the blurry ones. I was over at Pop's place one crisp fall afternoon, helping him stack firewood for the winter. The air smelled of wood smoke and damp leaves, and the sun was dipping low, painting the sky a soft gold that made the whole world feel warm. We were taking a break on the porch, sipping coffee from chipped mugs, when Pop's phone buzzed on the table. He picked it up, squinting at the screen through his bifocals, and muttered, "Well, I'll be it's old Jimmy Carter from down the road. Says he's in a pinch." I leaned over, curious, and saw a message on his Facebook app, a chat from someone named Jimmy Carter, a name I knew well. Jimmy had been Pop's fishing buddy for 40 years, but he'd moved to Florida a while back, and they mostly kept in touch through the occasional call. The message read, "Hey Hank, I'm in a real bind, got into a fender bender down here, and need $500 to cover the tow. Can you send it quick? I'll pay you back next week." Pop scratched his chin, frowning. Jimmy's a good man, never asked for a dime before. Reckon I oughta help him out. But something didn't sit right with me. Folks I'd heard about these scams where crooks pretend to be someone you know, using social media to trick you into sending money. "Pop," I said, setting my mug down, "let's double-check this before you do anything. Jimmy's not the type to ask for cash like this." We called Jimmy's real number, the one Pop had scribbled in his old address book, not the one on the message, and sure enough, Jimmy picked up, sounding as chipper as ever. "Hank, I ain't in no accident." He laughed, his voice crackling through the line. "Been fishing all day, caught a bass big enough to brag about. Who's saying I need money?" Pop's face went from puzzled to pale in a heartbeat, and he handed me the phone like it had burned him. "That wasn't Jimmy," he said, voice low. "Some low-down skunks using his name to get at me." Folks, my blood ran cold. Pop had come this close to sending $500 to a scammer who'd hacked or faked Jimmy's account, preying on the trust of an old friend. We checked the profile closer, and there it was, a tiny difference in the name, an extra letter that you'd miss if you weren't looking hard. Pop sat there, staring at the blackberry bushes, and muttered, "I've been fishing with Jimmy since we were knee-high to a grasshopper." Thought I could trust him, or whoever I thought was him. Ever had a message from a friend that didn't feel quite right, folks? Maybe someone you hadn't heard from in a while, asking for help out of the blue. Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear how you handled it. That day with Pop taught me a trick from the old days with a modern spin. Back when I was a kid, we'd always double-check with a neighbor if something seemed off. Oh, if a friend messages you on social media asking for money, don't send a dime until you call them directly, using a number you know is real. And while you're at it, check their profile for anything fishy, an extra letter, a weird photo, anything that doesn't add up. Those scammers are slick, but we're tougher, and Pop's close call wasn't the end of what I'd learned about keeping us old-timers safe. Pop's close call was a wake-up call. Folks, like a bucket of cold water on a frosty morning. It shook me to my core. I'd seen Mabel lose her savings to a fake email, watched Hank nearly hand over his bank details to a smooth-talking caller, and heard Betty's heart break over a one text that cost her more than just money. But seeing my own Pop, a man who'd taught me how to spot a liar with a handshake, almost fall for a scam on his dang fool gadget that hit me harder than a mule kick, it made me realize these online traps aren't just a passing storm. They're a flood, and us old-timers are the ones wading through it without a lifeboat unless we learn how to swim. Let's take a step back and look at the road we've traveled, folks. There's Mabel, sweet as her Tennessee tomatoes, sitting at her kitchen table with a handkerchief full of tears after a fake sweepstakes email took her nest egg. Then Hank, out by his Georgia barn, face red as a beet, nearly giving his account number to a voice on the phone that wasn't his bank. Miss Betty, with her lemon squares and her spunk, losing $50 to a text that promised an iPad she'd never see, and almost losing a whole lot more. And Pop, my own flesh and blood, staring at his blackberry bushes with a heavy heart, realizing that Jimmy Carter asking for $500 wasn't his fishing buddy at all, but a low-down skunk hiding behind a screen. Each one of them is different, ain't they? Mabel's a widow with a heart of gold. Hank's a farmer who'd rather talk to his hogs than a phone. Betty's a firecracker who'd dance circles around us all. And Pop's a stubborn old cuss who'd sooner wrestle a bear than admit he's wrong. But they've all got one thing in common: they're us, folks, or who we might be if we don't keep our eyes peeled. These scams are like wolves in sheep's clothing, and they're sniffing around our porches, waiting for us to let our guard down. I got to thinking, if it can happen to them, it can happen to any of us, and I'll be darned if I don't do my part to make sure every senior knows how to spot these traps before they spring. I called up my buddy Doc Evans. He's not just a sawbones but a whiz with this tech stuff, too, and asked him what he's seen out there in Tulsa. Over a crackly line, with that mud of his yapping in the background, he told me, these scammers are getting smarter every day. They know seniors are trusting, and they use that against them. But you can outsmart them if you know what to look for. That stuck with me, folks, and it's why I've been gathering these stories, not to scare you, but to arm you with the know-how to keep your hard-earned money where it belongs, in your pocket. So let's round up some tricks from the old days with a modern twist to keep us safe. First off, if something smells fishy, it probably is back when I was a kid. We'd say if a peddler's deal sounded too good, it was a con, and now that applies to anything online. An email, a call, a text, a message on social media, if it's asking for money, your account number, or your social security, don't bite. Hang up, delete it, and check with the real folks directly, using a number you know is legit, like the one on your bank card or the company's official website. Second, let's talk about those gadgets we're all learning to use. Pop's phone nearly got him in a heap of trouble, but there's a way to make it your friend instead of your foe. Doc says there's apps out there, free ones, even that can spot scam calls and texts before they get to you. They're like a guard dog for your phone. barking when something's off. Look up ones like Truecaller or Robokiller, or ask your grandkids to set them up for you. Back in the day, we'd keep a shotgun by the door for trouble. Now, these apps are your first line of defense. And here's the best trick of all. Folks, don't go it alone. We old-timers, we're tough as nails, but there's no shame in asking for help. If you get a message or a call that makes your gut twist, show it to your kids, your grandkids, or a neighbor you trust. Back when I was young, we'd holler for the whole family if a stranger came sniffing around now. It's the same with these online crooks. Two heads are better than one, and those young ones know a thing or two about this tech stuff we're still figuring out. What's your trick for staying safe out there, folks? Ever had a close call with a scam that made you think twice? Drop it in the comments. Your stories are the gold here, and they might just save someone else from a world of hurt. Hit that like button if these tales hit home. Smash subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss what's next. There's more waiting just around the bend. Share this with a friend who'd get a kick out of it. Let's keep the conversation going and keep our wallet safe. I've got more wisdom to share, so stick with me. We're not done yet.